This is Cyber Smokehouse, and I'm Ernie.
And I'm Graeme.
Join us as we grill the minds, dig into the experience, and serve up the stories of leaders in cybersecurity.
Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm. Well, today's guest is someone we're really excited to have on the show. He's a Chief Information Security Officer, a cyber resilience architect, and SaaS founder turned enterprise security leader. He's also a US veteran. He has scaled 120 plus person teams in covering IT, security, and AI, improving hiring, efficiency, retention, and team productivity. He's also a founder of a SaaS company and has led product, go-to-market, and growth through acquisition. He is the Chief Information Security Officer at Atlassian. David Cross, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Graeme. I'm really excited to join, and I hope to make this one of the best podcasts we've had in a while.
Very cool. Well, let's light the fire and crank up the heat in the smokehouse. All right, David, we like to just dive right in. So what do you think? What are the biggest challenges in cybersecurity these days?
Certainly, it's not going to surprise anyone, it's AI, but let's not put the same thing, right? I think the reality is I actually kind of predicted this almost 2 years ago. And I'm talking about the CISOs, for example, is I said to everybody, CISOs need to be technical and CISOs, need to be continually learning. And people really kind of poo-pooed that, right? Saying, David, no, that's not the way of the world. You're not thinking about it. Okay, today's the world of AI. Tell me what company can have a CISO that says, I don't know AI. I don't know how to do prompting. I don't know what guardrails are. It's unthinkable, right? So I think that's the reality is that today, right? Yourself, are you actually doing any vibe coding? Are you using agents right now?
Actually, that's our big push. I mean, we are all doing it. Actually, I was up late last night just trying to figure out what agency I build to simplify my life. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody needs to be. If you're not, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah. And we're encouraging everyone on our team to have at least two, be working with at least two of the platforms. So, personally, I've got three that I'm working with, and just to get that experience, right? Live it.
Exactly. Right. To think about a few years ago, right? Oh, you don't know how to use the internet? Okay, that's silly, right? Or nowadays, you can say someone that's like, I don't know how to use a smartphone. I could never do that for my work. It's unthinkable, right? And so can you tell me 3 years from now, let's say maybe a year from now, are you ever going to hire anyone in almost any role and saying, oh, you don't know how to use AI, right? And are you going to hire them, right? It's almost unthinkable, isn't it?
I do have a short funny story about that though. I did at one time try to do a no smartphone Sundays and I bought a flip phone. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this, simplify my life. It was like impossible because you go to Home Depot working on a project and you're like, oh, I got to look up parts or how to do something or like navigate somewhere and you just can't do it. And we'll probably get to the same point with AI where it just becomes your companion and you just have to do it. So.
But let's talk about one of the positive things, right? If we go back like 10 years ago, machine learning, data scientists, right? And people are like, oh, everyone's got to get into this, right? It wasn't trivial, right? You had to go do your favorite Andrew Ng's course on Coursera, right? And get your calculus refreshed, right? It wasn't easy. Now, the reality is now, name your favorite learning source. You can learn AI prompting in just a few hours, the very basics, right? So I think as everybody can get there quickly, it's not that, oh, I need to go take a college course. No. And so I think that's one of the strengths, but also I think it's maybe one of the potential dangers that we're going to get into here shortly.
Yeah, I think the whole concept of like a citizen developer now, right, with vibe coding and everything. I mean, we had a guest on, we were talking about this, how IT now, used to go to IT to build things for you. Well, now the business will often, code a prototype. And they're, using vibe coding, AI tools and so on, and then bring it to the IT and say, hey, this is it. I've proved it out. Now productionalize this for me, provide the supporting infrastructure. It kind of changes the whole way we think about building systems.
Absolutely. So I think I'll give you two pivots on this, right? If you think like high tech companies or maybe in yourself, right? Saying that, knowing that, hey, you're doing development, you have a software development life cycle, CSE pipelines, things like that. You need to fit into those things. You're not just going to vibe code and bypass your way out of it. That's just not in your interest, right? But now let's say other verticals, hospitals, manufacturing, retail, do they have that culture in knowledge in all the various roles? No, they don't. So this is where I think that, hey, this is where agents come in to help the agents, right? People vibe coding and using coding agents. Well, they also need the security, privacy, compliance agents to make sure that they don't go awry, right? And I think that's the opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'd be interested. What are you seeing in terms of encouraging like individual? Because I think we look at this in two ways, right? I mean, there's the kind of the personal productivity capabilities that AI can bring to us, and then there's the what can we do at the enterprise level? In terms of more automation in our business process. Even reengineering our business processes and so on. So as you look at this space, I mean, how do you look at each of those different use cases, if you like?
Absolutely. So, I think an element is Atlassian. It's kind of easy because, hey, we're a development company. We can build these things. We're building our own agents, right? But a lot of people, I was at a dinner recently, some other local CISOs, right? They're saying, well, what should we do, right? We got people are vibe coding and using cloud co-work and others. Name your favorite, coding agent, right? I said, hey, then I said, you really need to look at some of the agents out there to kind of monitor and help you, right? Things like Gnostic's got a great one. They did the unprompted conference, Striker AI. Hey, you can block things that the coding agent may do, or even Manifold's another one we're seeing is really, really helping enterprises. So that if you don't have that development culture and processes and pipeline, right, then bring in the agent to help you, right? So don't fear the agents, just make it a party, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, but from a security perspective, now put your security leader's hat on, and then because a lot of these skills and tools and so on that you'd be leveraging to build these agents are open sourced. How do you protect the organization?
I think the element is what we look at is not just of letting the way you think about it is that you have a security development life cycle, right? Or software development life cycle, right? And today you have a lot of processes. Now with the coding agents, right? The coding agents, like, they may not do everything perfect. Let's say we'll be a little bit, dangerous, right? They may pull, something from that's not in your artifactory, right? They may pull down a package or do something that. Now, how do you solve this? Well, you have the security development lifecycle and software development lifecycle processes. You just may do them slightly differently. And this is where you're the agent saying that we're still going to do the scanning, the SCA, right? And the analysis of these things. We're still going to make sure all the packages and the third party and fourth party, composition analysis is performed, right? You just may be able to using that with agents and automation as well, right? And you're just doing it in that same line. In the end, most practices, and that's what we do, is the human is still at the end, right? The analogy says, if you think about 15 years ago, humans, we wrote all the code and we tried to build AI and automation to QA our code, right? Now it's kind of the other way around, isn't it? Agents, AI is writing all the code. We need humans to QA the code.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, so the whole human in the loop is an important concept, which I think is what you kind of alluding to there. What about the other? I think another big challenge that a lot of organizations are faced with is just the whole identity managing. This now with all these agents that are potentially, it's not like we can't apply the same approach we had with, say, privileged access management, because a lot of those credentials, machine credentials, had a specific purpose, but an agent can do. Its behavior will depend on the context that was given, right? So it's kind of unpredictable in what it can do. So what's your thoughts on, and the numbers are going to get astronomical, I think, so depending on what study you look at, it's somewhere between 20 to 80 to 1, right? So anytime, it could be 80 non-human identities to one every human identity. So it's a big challenge. Yeah, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. No, I kind of two thoughts on how I think this is going to look in the future here to a degree is we now have these agents, right? So first you need inventory, just like everything else, just like, SaaS posture management. I say we need the agentic, the agent posture management. You got that inventory or registry, everything, and it's going to be dynamic. They're going to come and go. The most important part of that is they are identities. They're non-human identities. Now, they're not the same non-human identities like everyone's spun up like service accounts and all those things. Nope, not that. It's kind of like a hybrid, or it's like a clone of a human identity. So what do we really need? And I think we're going to see the maturity of the overall identity access management, ecosystem, right? To take on and how to manage these hybrid non-human identities with their entitlements, their privileges, et cetera. The other element is kind of like my prediction is for those of us, here, Graeme, I see some of us got few gray hairs. If we go back to the days of um, attribute-based access control, the ABAC, right? And so like very academic, very military, and our three-letter agencies love that. So it just wasn't practical in the commercial world, was it? But now when you're thinking about agents, we want to have it in the context of how they're operating on what data. ABAC seems to make a lot of sense now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, everyone that was very theoretical. I remember when I sat my CISSP was probably in I don't know, 1980 something. I think. I mean, I know, I'm 4146. There you go. So, I mean, that was we were talking about that back then, and it was, like, yeah, it was kind of restricted to the highly secretive organizations, and there was no real practical commercial implication of that, right? So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So mark my words, and kind of measure it so that we'll see in a few years. It's like, wow, I was just talking a podcast about ABAC. I never could have guessed that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the interesting discussions I had with someone is, just more from like an HR standpoint, who has accountability for these agents? So everybody's out there building these agents and they're running around, but what if they do something rogue? So now does the person who built that agent and it does something bad, can you fire someone based on what that agent does? Like, do you tie that all to the person who built them? Yeah, I think that's a fascinating topic, right? Is, do we go back to the element of, oh, who did the commit or who did the change list or the PR, right? For that agent, right? Is that the person who's accountable, right? Is like, because that's what we would do today is like, who made that change and then who reviewed that change, right? Or deployed that, right? Well, we should hold them accountable, right? They missed something. Very interesting. I'm going to say, are we going to, the provenance and case law in the future in this particular case? But I think that brings up the other point is that I think is really the principle we have to have is no agent should operate without logging, right? Right. And the reason behind that is if something goes wrong, you have the logs to say, well, what went wrong? How did it go wrong? Where did it go wrong? Right. Let's analyze that. Right. Because we know it will go wrong. But if there is no logging, wow, we're in a mess. The other element is that eventually as it matures, right, and as we learn from the logging, we can actually do alerting and other types of things like, wow, the agent went haywire. Oh, something happened, or it went someplace we didn't expect it to do. When you've had that data, right, then we do the alerting, the blocking, analysis. And I think it's very important. It's going to come at a cost, but I think that's what's going to protect us.
Yeah. It'll be different though, because today we can log like what a particular identity credential, script, whatever it is doing. But now this agent calls another agent who then calls another agent. And so now we've got this whole chaining effect and being able to kind of tie all those together. Traditional logging doesn't anticipate that type of a behavior, right? So we're gonna have to change the way we do logging as an example, right?
Absolutely. Well, I was just asking your thoughts on this. There's certainly a lot of debate. I was like, all the MCP servers, right? Should organizations, should you have just an AI gateway? You can use that as the control point with logging and connections, or an MCP proxy, right? That you can control, or is that just that's not going to scale? That's too restrictive or not? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all evolving so quickly. I mean, unfortunately, there's no real universal standards around any of this stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that, WC3 is doing and others that are trying to define these standards. And I mean, we're all learning together. So I think it's too early to make a call on what the right approach is. I think we're all kind of learning and developing, and the standards bodies are trying quickly to come up with things. But it's really, I mean, it's interesting space. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways, I think let's go for those again, for us with the gray hairs. So let's go to the IETF, right? And, we're going to have the request for comments RFC for HTTP 1.0 and SSL 1.0. In some ways, isn't that kind of where we're at right now with some of these protocols?
Yeah, it's interesting times, and like you said, the whole attribution question, and that gets even more interesting. Ernie's example is, who do you hold accountable in the enterprise? But what about when enterprise agent starts talking to enterprise agent? Now you've got cross jurisdictional attribution, different legal regimes that may be operating across, right? I mean, we already know that California has an AI law. And other states will probably have some AI laws coming up. It'll be the one that, so, and then you've got cross country. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day where a guy is developing an AI bank, right? So it's the whole bank is going to be driven by agents. And he was making a comment that actually, agents are really good at doing fraud detection. They're better than humans actually, in many ways. But he said, we're going to have to work with the regulators because they are not ready for any of this, right? And we have to kind of bring them along with us on that journey.
That is fascinating, right? And it's kind of like, getting ourselves in trouble, but it's almost like you can't start thinking about the agents talking to agents, right? The concept. I hadn't thought of this before, but let's say, hey, here's the agent in the United States that's talking to an agent in France. Do the two agents know on what they can share or not share, right? Do they have to have a broker negotiating saying, oh no, I can't give you that data, right? For this transaction, because that would be a violation of this EU law or those type of things. And do we have a brokerage or other things? Or, I think we had, Swift has made it easy for financial transactions, but agents are messing with data. Is this a whole new world that's about to appear here?
Interesting. Hey, so switching gears a little bit on you, you talked about CISOs having to be technical, and I'm just thinking about just building up staff. So now you've got AI that's doing a lot of junior level activities, and that's really how we built up staff that we build up in the ranks. So now we're eliminating SOC 1 analysts and are gone now, right? So we're going to start using AI for that. How is that changing, staffing models and bringing in junior people? Like, how are you addressing that, and how does that change how you're building teams?
Yeah, talking to a lot of members of the community, and actually, my colleague and I, we're going to actually, for the Cybersecurity Risk Alliance, we're going to have a local event in the near future here, talking about, hey, can AI replace the SOC or not, right? But I can say, talk to a lot of the other CISOs. Is in a general sense, this is what we're seeing: is that it's not reducing the SOC, right? It's actually, you're making people more productive, right? There's an element is that today, what a tier 1 SOC 1 analyst could do is like, it may take them a number of years of building this experience, right? To be able to move to tier 2 and do more analysis and things. But now with AI, they can do more, right? And certainly tier 2 analysis, like, wow, what they can analyze and do from a speed and complexity is magnified by 10x, right? And so it's not necessarily about replacement, it's that people are more productive. And so it's really as like, you may need 15 people in the past, well, maybe you only need 10 now, right? Because of their productivity, and they can do so much more. But I'll also give another analogy. I'm doing some work on some analysis of FedRAMP, right? I'm using AI, right, to do the analysis and prompting, right? Now, if I'd never understood and been experienced with FedRAMP and policies, how would I even know what to prompt it, right? And how would I ever know if it's hallucinating or not, right? I had to have that experience. So I think it's the combination of both. So before, it's like, yeah, it's going to take me a few hours to read it, write it down, double check my work. Now I can do it in 5 minutes because I've got experience and knowledge, but it can synthesize it and produce it for me. And I'm saved all the time for labor, but I still requires my experience and analysis.
No, that makes sense. So we're really not replacing, we're just changing the roles. And so we're still building people up. And it's very interesting because we've done these, and I think the perspectives are very different. And everybody's concerned that AI is going to replace jobs. And I think you're putting that fear at ease, which is good.
I think I'll say in the industry, right? And I think this is one of the hardest things we're all facing. Let's say the computing industry, that, not just cybersecurity, right? Is the supply demand curve has shifted, right? The number of people that can do things, right? And the number of people that are needed to do things is shifted, unfortunately, right? Because you need less people because they can do more. They're because of AI. I think that's just a wave that we're going to have to go through over a few years, but it's natural.
Very good. Well, I'm curious about just general leadership, but I mean, I like your style. I'm curious about just building teams. I'm also curious about your military background and what you bring, what comes out of that to leading teams. Do you have any special secret sauce on how you lead your teams and like your philosophy behind it?
Yeah, it took a few years, but it certainly is. I'm for military service, it's more about commitment to the country and serving the country, and as a commitment. But ultimately, what I like to share, in which I also try to evangelize to employers, right, is an element is that, the military service, it brings a lot of great principles to a company, right? And not just cybersecurity, right? Because the military, it's about honesty, integrity, attention to detail, loyalty, commitment, an ability to be trained, right? Dynamic. And at the same time, how to operate under fire, right? So I'll give a simple example is like people that are in, security or your SOC or things like that. It's like there's a breach, there's an incident, right? Everything's going haywire. You're like, okay, we have a playbook, right? We're going to follow the playbook. We're going to operate in under the tension because we're trained to do that. And I would say for people with the SOC and other things, you train like you're going to fight, right? Same in the military, same in Instagram. Why do we do tabletops, right? Because you're going to train like you fight, right? And that's a big thing. The other element is all the other principles, right? Is that many veterans can bring into a company is that they may not have an experience, but they know how to be trained. They can be dynamic, but they're going to bring all these great, in principles, honesty, integrity, and focus and loyalty, right? And that can add a lot, to the diversity and success of a company.
Hmm. And then, so in your recruiting and hiring, do you recruit out of the military heavily, or how do you find those people out of the military adapt into the commercial world?
A big part of it, it's a great question. I think about things is it's about the network, right? And I think there's an element is that, how I'm connected and support that network. At the same time as I kind of pivot to your question here, people like, David, how do you become a CISO, right? How do you become a Fortune 500 CISO? And I tell everybody, you need to invest in it and build a network, right? And part of it is, just like I was recently at a local dinner and interacting with the other people, I said, you need to probably invest 5 or 10 years in building your network and connection so people get to know you, you get to know them, and you can have the connection. But it's not something that, 3 months, I built a network and I'm set. No, it's a long-term investment. I don't know if either you ever go running, ever do a marathon. Can you do a marathon? Let's not talk about movies, right? Can you do a marathon? Next weekend I'm running a marathon. No, you are investing for like 4 months, right? Of your life and everything to get to that point, right? And that's what I think in our careers, right? Can you build a network in 6 months, 1 year? No, it's a long-term investment, but you can get a good return in the long run.
I'm sure Ernie's got a marathon story to share because he is a couple of years ago he ran a marathon a month. So tell us about it, Ernie.
Yeah. So I did have a goal. When I turned 48, my goal is to run a marathon a month for a year. And I built up to that. But to your point, I built up to it over 3 years. I did a marathon, 2 marathons in a year. Then I did 4 in a year. And then, the goal was to do one a month for a year, but that was 2020. So I made it 2 marathons and then the world shut down. So I didn't actually get to do it until 2023, but I actually got it done. But to your point, yes, it didn't just dive in and do it. It built up to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big fan of running. I've only done 1 marathon, so I could check that box. I'm more the half marathon, right? Type of things, but I love it for multiple reasons, right? I'm a big fan is running and physical fitness in general, right? It cleanses not, in your physically, right? And also mentally, right? And it's kind of turned into my little bit of, that's my meditation, right? You get to a zone for a long run. Wow. What a place to be in the euphoria afterwards. You may be very exhausted. It's amazing. And so one of my goals is I could say that, so goals is passions is, as a runner, I'm a world traveler. My blog, davidcrosstravels.com. I've traveled and run on every continent in the world, all 7 continents, including Antarctica. And I have the Garmin GPS data on it. It's on my blog, things like that. But it's quite an experience.
Did you? I've got a friend. I think there's a marathon or a half that you run down there. Did you do that? One of those?
No, I just did on another operation in Antarctica. It was not an official run, but I said that I did my own 5K. It was part of Antarctica where they had the warm springs and things like that. So a lot of the snow was melted. So I created my little path and I said I did a 5K in Antarctica.
That's very cool. All right. One other question on the leadership side. So you guys are global, right? So do you have any tips and tricks on managing a global team, and I assume a hybrid team as well?
Yeah, this actually, I'll go back to 2 parts. Is that a long time ago in the days of Microsoft, right? Ever people heard of the famous Bill Gates Think Week papers, right? And he did this every year. And I had worked remotely overseas as an expat for a few years, right? And I wrote a Think Week paper about success in distributed teams, right? And it turned out to be that year, I'm very honored that it was one of the top 30 papers chosen by Bill Gates that year by himself. And what was the premise behind this? And I said, it's all about communication, right? You think as global companies, remote companies, these type of things, it's all about communication. And something I started, I don't know how many years, 15, 20 years ago, I write what's called the weekly security dossier, whatever company I'm at, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, now Atlassian. I write the weekly security dossier, right? Saying, this is what we're doing. This is what's going on. This is the decision. This is my top of mind. And so no matter what, I can say, everybody, David, what are we doing here? What's going on? I said, did you read the dossier, right? And people have known me over the years. But it's about that connections, because otherwise, when things are fuzzy and opaque, people don't know. You start to assume. Everyone, what's the Seinfeld episode? Never assume, right? We won't go there, right?
Yeah, that's great. So on that, so that dossier, is that going to distribute it throughout the company, or is it just for your team, or how do you use that to communicate?
It's actually two things. I send a weekly mail, right, to everyone, and then I put it into a local blog, so it has the entire archive as well. And of course, I send it to my entire team, but anyone in the company, right, can subscribe and get to it as well, and it just grows over time. And the thing is, yep, I'm a leader, large organization. I write it. Do I have people write it and put my name on it? Of course not, right? I write it every week. Now, I do use a little AI now and then because it's easier just saying, oh, analyze this article and give me 3 sentences. Great. So I'm taking advantage of that, but it's still me. It's still what's my voice. And it's kind of who I am.
That's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's a big commitment to be able to do that on a consistently week to week. I mean, I'd love to do that, but I just never have the time. It doesn't seem to, so you must put aside a reasonable amount of time at the beginning of the week or end of the week to be able to do that.
But isn't it, it's just like Atomic Habits, right? The book Atomic Habits, like, you can have your bad habits, your good habits, just like running, right? Do you like, if you go 3 days and you don't run at all, it's eating at you, right? You just get into that life rhythm. And once you start doing it, you can do it forever.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the future. And you've already talked about how important AI is to the future and all the excitement and concerns there. What else from the technology point of view are you excites you or concerns you looking forward?
Yeah, it's interesting that we've got AI and there's some of the challenges going on with that. We certainly have the new world. When you think about not just AI, but what's causing it, DLP, right? The data leak prevention and detection, right? Before it's kind of like people leaking through email and sharing. But now I think of the new world we're seeing a little bit is, well, with AI, like people, I'll say most people accidentally, you put some customer information or sensitive information into this AI tool you like. Oh, they can't redact that. They can't they're training on that. I can't do anything about it. I think that's one of the new interesting space that we're seeing across the industry that people like, everybody's oversharing, you say where you have SharePoint or Confluence and Jira, like people, you open up AI. Oh, wow. We didn't have anything labeled or classified. Everyone has access to everything. Wow. AI can find it. Even before you always had access to it. You just didn't know how to find it. Well, AI will find it. So I think we got this whole new world of DLP, which I think a lot of companies need to think about, including data classification and labeling.
Yeah. And yeah, that's so both the data as well as the access management, right? Because that's the other piece of that. I mean, like you said, you've probably always had access to that. You just didn't know how to get to it. But now using AI, that exposes all those problems. Yeah.
There's another place I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, right? Is the quantum, right? Is of the quantum encryption and things like that. Is like a lot of people are still using RSA keys and their X509 certificates and stuff, right? I'll be open and honest, is that I'm still a little skeptical. Like, does every little, craft shop and retail shop need to be worried about that someone's going to, capture all their traffic and break it, et cetera. Like, certainly, hey, name your favorite defense manufacturer. Of course they need to worry about that. Right. But I think a lot of people are kind of rising the fear a little bit, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot, it varies, to be honest. I mean, some of the companies that we work with have, started at least doing assessments and understanding where the exposures are. Others are just putting it off. A lot of some of our clients are also, more and more have moved more and more to the cloud, right? And so they're really relying on their cloud providers, whether it be, whether it be a PaaS or SaaS or whatever, to handle that for them, right? And so it shifts that now to a kind of a third party risk management framework, and how are we going to ensure that they are ready for Q day whenever that happens, right?
A couple roles ago, I was at IBM. I led data and application security services for IBM. And so there was a big push, with quantum and the quantum computing and all that stuff. And so there was a big push on quantum readiness. So we would always bring it up, and everybody wanted to have a conversation. They wanted to get the PhDs in there to talk about it, but it was all academic. We never actually sold any projects with it. And this was circa 2016. And then it was interesting. So I caught up with my old boss, who's really now focused on it. So we're move ahead 10 years. And there's still a lot of discussion. And now, like, people are getting more serious about it. But I think, to Graham's point, it's too, it's too extreme. So either people are like, I'm just going to worry about it when it's a problem. And I think that's the smaller companies too, that they just can't invest a lot of money in it, and they'll wait till someone just tells them. And then I think other people are putting money into it. They're like, we need to be ready. We need to have a plan. Some of the boards are asking about it. But I think the big thing is it's not like when, the 2000 problem where you have a cutoff date. So you don't really know when it's going to be an issue. And so it's just all over the place.
I actually think the biggest issue may run into our consumers, right? I'll give you an example. Say, name your favorite bank, right? Says, no, we're switching, to, we now have the elliptic keys in the search, for their websites and things like, oh, grandma's, older machine, right? Like, nope, it doesn't support those, right? And like, she can't connect to her bank anymore. What are we going to do? I do worry about that, I think, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Graeme, you mentioned something else, companies moving to the cloud, right? So why are companies not moving to the cloud? What's the real reason people are not moving to the cloud, right? I'm still, how many organizations are like, no, I still want to have Joe IT guy managing this, Exchange server in the back room all by ourselves, like, versus using the cloud. What's the thinking going on here?
I think it's just often it's a lot of technology debt. I mean, I know from my experience when I was on the other side of the fence, I mean, we were a late comer to the cloud. Now, I was at Equifax. I mean, it's public knowledge, right? I mean, I was there during the breach. We were just experimenting in 2017 with a couple of applications, but we had a significant, we ran 24 data centers across the world with applications, with everything we'd built, all our products running in those data centers, right? Now, fast forward, right? Today, Equifax runs a large part of their environment in the cloud, right? Their data fabric, their everything. So, but it was, I remember doing the analysis, and we were back then being a very transaction intensive organization. The cost benefit wasn't there. We ran then, because it was tremendous high load transactions, and it just wasn't competitive in the cloud. So I mean, I think there's all sorts of reasons, but that's been my experience. It's typically it's often the work to kind of refactor applications, get them to run appropriately in the cloud, assuming you're not using SaaS, right? And as soon as you're building your own stack, right? Our company, we're doing everything in the cloud, right? We started 3 years ago. We're doing everything in the cloud because that's, and I think any company born today, why wouldn't you just do everything in the cloud? Everything's available to you there.
Yeah, I think it's like, how do you keep up to date with the latest technology, the latest security, right? Like, who can maintain firewalls and hardware and all these type of things anymore, right? And having cybersecurity, experts 24/7, threat analysis, all those type of things. I think it's too hard to do. It just doesn't scale, no pun intended.
So it's interesting ask you this question. So as organizations move everything to the cloud, I mean, including networks, right? I mean, databases, networks, applications, everything's pretty much gone to the cloud, right? What is the security leader actually responsible for now? Because you've outsourced like 90% of the technology, right?
Great question. I did a talk at RSA a couple of years ago, actually, on this topic, right? And there's two things, right? Is so that as a customer, it's like, well, you don't own the infrastructure, you don't own all the things in the cloud, but what do you own? It's in the application, it's your users, it's your data, right? And so therefore you're in control of that, right? And I think the biggest mistake is let's putting aside that, hey, all your identity, are using multi-factor and not SMS for multi-factor. One, are you got really tight identity control, for your users in that application? The second thing is it's your data. Now, when people move from their on-premise apps and things to the cloud, what's the thing they forget about? The logs, the application logs, right? And so when something happens, like, you know, Jane Smith got phished, wherever, and then something went wild. Okay, let's pull down the logs and see when this occurred and how it happened. Oh, we weren't pulling them down. What do you mean they don't just store the logs forever? No, and it's always after the fact, right? I know this was a company that does great talks. Or say, Mitiga, right? In Mitiga IR, and they say, hey, you got all these SaaS applications, but you still need logs. You still be collecting the logs. You still be analyzing the logs. The cloud provider's not going to do that for you. So forget about that when you move from your on-premise servers, right, to there, because on-premise the logs are all there. So I kind of going along with this, right, but I think that's one of the biggest risks for many companies.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, data and identity are the two big things, right? Because a lot of the application functionality and security and all that's managed by the providers. So, interesting. All right, cool. So we've talked about coming technology. Anything else as you look out in the future from as a security leader that excites you or scares you?
Yeah, I say I'm so excited about AI. We kind of were talking about earlier, right? There's so much thing we can do. I excited now. Even I joined Atlassian like a year and a half ago, and what we do with Rovo and other things. I started my first things a year ago was like I asked Rovo, how many laptops do we have, across the company, and what's their state, right? Wow, I can just ask that question. It pulls it from Jira and Confluence, everything. Nowadays, it's gone to the next level, right? I can actually say, what we call teamwork graph, everything from Bitbucket to Confluence, all our workflows, our pipelines. I can analyze, where this is occurring, right? And like in 2 minutes, I have everything, right? Because we got all the data, and then we can kind of pulling it together. It's not just a simple query anymore. It's more of an analysis that I can have in minutes, right? It's unbelievable how that changes the world and what we can do and make the best possible decisions that you couldn't even think about this 3 years ago.
So you feel like you've solved the single pane of glass from a security leader's perspective? I mean, you're getting all the information that you need and kind of on a single pane of glass today? Because I mean, that's kind of that's the utopia that people have been talking about for years, right?
Graeme, it's a great thing. I guess I was never a big fan of the single pane of glass. We think about the large enterprises because who can scale large enterprises? Like you start doing the visual graphs and things like, come on, guys, this doesn't scale. I can go to the old days of the MMC and Windows is like, yeah, I'm going to look at 1 billion certificates. Like, no, it won't scroll, right? So, but now here's maybe the question. The way I think about it is, do I ever need a single pane of glass? Because I just want to ask questions. As long as I can ask the questions, I can get every answer in real time whenever I want it, right? And so why have a pane of glass? Why do all that investment? Now it goes back to the other element of, hey, buddy, remember the command line? There's not this clicking the button. It's not just the mouse anymore. It's like AI the world is like, there's a command line. You need to know how to use the command line and type, everybody.
Right. Well, speak. You can speak now too.
Speak to the command line.
I do admit, I do love the transcription. I'm still a Windows guy. Yep. Even though we're a Linux environment, I'm still a Windows guy. And yep, the transcription into that 95% of the time, perfect. One little edit. Boy, that saved me 1 minute in just the typing.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Whisperflow. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I use that. It's pretty cool. So it's definitely saved me a lot of hours of time.
But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do we really need a single pane of glass anymore? Right? When we can have AI can tell us everything we need to know and when we need to know it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that the whole idea of single pane glass is, look, rather than we're running all these disparate security tools that are providing insight, and we want to be able to bring all that insight together so we can understand what's going on and get early warning and be able to react, timely. And so the single pane of glass was always the solution for that, because we wanted to have that dashboard, or that, that look at those dials and meters to be able to kind of but you're right. It's a yesterday paradigm, because now agents can find all that information and just report to us, and we just tell them what's important to us, and configure them in a way that they can just tell us when we need to be concerned about something. And I mean, even to the extent that they could start taking actions even without our without our involvement, right? I mean, it's this, yeah.
Absolutely. I give an example, like, here our AI is here at Atlassian's Rovo, right? Is like I can build the agent in 5 minutes, connecting to the MCP server to Wiz, we use Wiz, right? It's like I want to know every morning if there's a critical, right? At this time, pulling it out to me. And great, I can build that agent and connect to the MCP server in 5 minutes. A year ago, 2 years ago, how long would you take to code that up? Well, a day or two. I can set it up now in 5 minutes.
Give you whatever dashboard or graph you want too. Yeah.
Yeah. It can create one and put it into create it in the dynamic, go create me the Confluence page, right? And that's my dashboard, create it on the fly, things like that. When it's done, after that instance, kill it, right? Wow. Whatever way you want to look at it. I totally agree.
Well, David, we spent the first half really learning from you. We do want to learn a little bit more about you. So take us back a little bit. So how did you actually get into cybersecurity? I mean, a lot of us, I think us older people just fell into it, right? We were doing something that all of a sudden we found out, oh, you should be the firewall guy because you did this. What was the thing that got you into it?
Yeah. So I'll see if I got the book back here. Oh yeah. See, back here, I got the Bruce Schneier's Applied Cryptography book. Okay. The first edition. Okay. So can you guess where I got that book? You're probably not. I bought it in the Naval Exchange Shop in Naples, Italy. We were returning from our last cruise, right, on the Eisenhower's CVN 69, right? Bought that book at the Naval Exchange. I still have it here. And it coming back because hey, I only had another 6 months, I think, in the Navy, whatever. So what am I going to do, right? I said, it's computer science or something like that. And I read that. I said, this is exciting, right? This is dynamic. This is the opportunity. And that's what, kind of set my heart and goal of where I wanted to be, right? And because I saw that it's the big thing is, it's not just computer science. The big thing is it's dynamic. It's always changing. And that's for, in my head that I can't be, just silent, right? Like when I go running, some people disagree. I don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts, everybody, right? I listen to podcasts because my brain's got to be thinking. And so that's why I love security, and that's where I started.
Very cool. And so if you look back, is there anything you would do differently in your path to where you are now?
What would I do differently? One of the things is a principle. I certainly, when I first left the military, I wanted to join Microsoft. Like, no, my skills were not good enough. So, hey, I went back to graduate school for a couple of years. And I start, trying to learning, right? And I think one of the things is that of investing, you got to be continuously learning, right? And the philosophy, if you're not continuously learning, right, you're slowly just going to decline, right? To say, oh, wow, you're a great CISO. Well, you're not going to invest time and learn AI, you're done, right? And so I think that if you look at over time, the people that are always doing the best, right, are the people that are always not just investing in more time at work, they're investing in more time in themselves, right? And I wish I would have thought about that much earlier, in my career and invested in it. And than I did, but I learned quickly.
Well, so hopefully we have some people coming up in security here. What advice do you have for the young ones coming up in the industry?
Yeah, a lot of things is certainly historically, I've always said it's like, hey, if you can write code, you're always going to have a job. Now, the new pivot now with AI is like, hey, you need to if you can use AI and write code, right, and ship things, right, you're going to have a job, right? But I think one of the best advice is like, we talk about the supply demand curve. People are like, oh my gosh, it's flooded, right? The first question I ask everybody or give them advice, to a mentee, I say, where's your GitHub repo? Where's your blog, right? Because you think about, let's say if you're an actor or a model, right? You want to say, let me see your portfolio, right? And like, oh, okay, let's take you on. So nowadays you look at a resume and you're like, I don't know, do we waste the time? Do you interview this person or not? Or honestly, think about yourself. It's like, they say, go look at my blog and my GitHub repos, right? And then you can see that of what I can really do. And it'll take you wouldn't you go click and go see what's actually there, right? And like, if there's some meaningful stuff there, like, hey, this person knows their stuff. So I say, I think I learned on another podcast. I knew which one it was. Maybe it's Professor Scott Galloway. I don't know if you ever guys heard of him, right? He basically says, don't talk about your experiences, talk about your skills or what your tasks that you can do, right? So this kind of tied me back to my thoughts about GitHub and repos and blogs, right? It's like, hey, I could do A, B, and C, right? And here's the examples of what I can do, right? Here's examples of the output of those type of things. And then it gets very easy for you to get a job and get noticed.
So I know you're also involved in funding up and coming product companies, and be interested to get your perspectives on, what as you look at kind of potential companies to invest in, what are some of the key things that are important for, say, product developers and people there? Because there's a lot of people out there leveraging, back to our AI topic, leveraging AI to kind of create new solutions, new products.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating in the industry right now, without question, right? The market's flooded. I wouldn't call it a bubble, but I think it's becoming, commoditized, very quickly. If we go back 10, 15 years ago, remember the days with, you had all the startups saying that, hey, we're going to give you encryption of your storage in the cloud, right? And, as an add-on. Nowadays, you're like, what do you mean third party? I'm not going to do that. It's already there, right? So I think we're starting to see this with like agentic security and things like that. There's a way. Can they all survive? No, right? They will get acquired and merged into greater things. But one of the premises I've learned of, being involved in the startup ecosystem and others is always think about not just the technology, think about the customer, right? I think sometimes the startups, like, you understand the enterprise, you understand how they work, you understand how they operate. You need to have a capabilities that fits into their environment, right? So become integrated technology. It's not as strong as it used to be, but historically, like, no, if you don't integrate with Active Directory, how are you going to operate in an enterprise, right? It doesn't, right? It's a lot of people, oh, that's not cool. Like, but that's what the enterprises use, isn't it, right? I know it's changed a little bit since then, but it's still Active Directory in most enterprises is still pretty dominant, right? So I think about how you think about the customer, how you integrate in their environment, and that's how you can be successful. Oh, I'll give you the other example. You're going to build something. If you're doing, nowadays it's changed with AI, but it's like, oh, download this or go to Substack or whatever and things like this. If it doesn't compile on the first try and just work, how many more times are you going to give it? How many are you going to give it? Maybe 5 minutes? It would be so crazy generous. 15 minutes of you trying to fix something, a link or whatever. And then if it doesn't, you flip the bit, right? And that's what it's all about. You got to make it seamless and viral.
Yeah, great advice. All right, so we are the Cyber Smokehouse, so we'd love to hear about your. Are you an outdoor griller? Are you a smoker? What's your food passion?
Well, certainly, is you got to, for meat, especially when it's really outside cold and snowing and things like that. When you can grill meat, it's always phenomenal. The flavors and everything else is so great. But I'm not the expert smoker, right? I'm not a smoker, right? But this is where it's about having community and friends, right? I have a South African friend in our neighborhood here at JD, that's kind of smoker, and it makes an amazing brisket. And so, say, even if you're not good in life and these type of things, if you have a good friend, you're going to be taken care of.
That's true for boats too, by the way.
Yeah, let's not go ski waterboarding and things like that. Let's not buy a boat for that. No, let's find a friend that's got one.
Yeah. No, I know Ernie's often cooking and sharing food with the neighbors, so that's so true.
That's my peace offering. So when I'm wafting smoke over their houses and they have their windows open, I figure if I feed them, they won't get too mad at me. Yeah, that's my trick. Yeah. So if people want to connect with you, it sounds like you have a couple websites. You do a lot of podcasts. Where can they find you? And I'm actually curious. I didn't know about the travel site.
Yeah, I'm pretty active in LinkedIn and things like that. So I've got followers, and I almost respond to everybody, for various things on that. So easy found. The trick is remember, I'm David B as in boy Cross, right? Because there's another famous David Cross, right? That sometimes confuse us, right? The other thing is I'm a world traveler. My goal is before I die, 100 countries. I'm about to 70 so far. So it's davidcrosstravels.com. And I show everywhere, run around the world, and have a lot of enjoyment on that. And that's kind of my one of my personal passions.
Now, I got to ask, have you been to New Zealand?
Of course.
What was your favorite part?
My favorite part actually was in Christchurch. Well, actually, there's two. There's two things I gotta say too. Is I remember in Christchurch, because they had the U.S. Base there for going to Antarctica.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting to visit.
Deep freeze. US deep freeze. This, yeah.
Another one was Dunedin, right? I thought took a wonderful drive into the countryside where there's, more sheep than people. But, the countryside is so beautiful and relaxing, and it was quite a delight.
Yeah. Well, Christchurch is my hometown. So South Island, I'm always a big fan of the South Island. I always think the South Island's the most prettiest part of the country.
To go down the far south and the fjords and stuff, it's like Alaska, right? All the rain and cold and like, wow.
And the native forest is beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. You're making me homesick. Awesome. Well, David, it's been a real pleasure. We've had a great conversation. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
I really enjoyed it. I hope we can do another one in the future. We have another great topic to talk about.
Great. And thank you, audience. If you've learned something today or laughed, tell someone about this podcast. Thanks again, David. This is another exciting episode of the Cyber Smokehouse. See you next time.
And that wraps another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at cybersmokehouse.com. Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
TBD Cyber works with organizations to assess their security program, develop and implement security initiatives, and optimize their security investments. We work in areas as broad as data security, risk management, cyber resilience, and security architecture. Our clients value us for our extensive expertise and independent advice, which is why we do not sell security products or deliver managed security services. If you want to work with a trusted advisor, we can help. You can learn more at tbdcyber.com. We'll see you on the next one.